Greetings, everyone. StephenGray here, and I'm delighted to be interviewing Dr. Dennis McKenna today. This is the second YouTube channel video interview that I'm doing in a series. I've just started this series. Did one a week or two ago well, I don't know when you're going to be seeing this, but a week or two ago I did one with the remarkable Chris Beisch, which is already up on YouTube as Dr. McKenna and I do this one. So I'm going to introduce Dr. McKenna. He's already here, as you can see, but I'm going to introduce him to you by reading his bio. But first, I want to say, just before I do that, that I know Dennis personally. I've been co-organizing the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference for quite a few years, and Dennis, I think, has spoken at it 4 times by this point, and no doubt there will be more. Dennis may consider this a bit of an overstatement because he's a humble gentleman, but I would say without a doubt that Dennis McKenna is truly one of the great elder statesmen of the psychedelic movement, and has given much to this community and to the furthering of our understanding of psychedelics and our position on this planet altogether. So I'm going to read you the bio from our Spirit Plant Medicine Conference from last year. And it goes something like this. In fact, exactly like this. Dennis McKenna's professional and personal interests are focused on the interdisciplinary study of ethnopharmacology and plant hallucinogens. He received his doctorate in 1984 from the University of British Columbia, where his doctoral research focused on the ethnopharmacological study of ayahuasca and ukuhe. Don't know if I pronounced that right. He joined Shaman Pharmaceuticals as director of ethnopharmacology in 1990 and relocated to Minnesota in 1993 to join the Aveda Corporation as senior research pharmacognosist. Cognosist, okay. I thought it was something about gnosis. Anyway, Dr. McKenna taught courses in ethnopharmacology, botanical medicines, and plants in human affairs at the Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota from 2001 to 2017. He's a founding board member of the Hefter Research Institute and serves on the advisory board of nonprofit organizations in the fields of ethnobotany and botanical medicines. He was a key organizer and participant in the Huasca Project, an international biomedical study of ayahuasca used by indigenous people and syncretic religious groups in Brazil. From 2004 to 2008, he was the principal investigator on a project funded by the Stanley Medical Research Institute to investigate Amazonian ethnomedicines for the treatment of schizophrenia and cognitive deficits. In 2017, with the collaboration of many colleagues, he organized and presented a landmark conference, the Ethnopharmacologic Search for Psychoactive Drugs, 50 Years of Research. The conference commemorated the 50th anniversary of the original conference held in San Francisco in 1967. The 2-volume proceedings of both conferences were published in 2018 and in a limited edition by Synergetic Press. Dr. McKenna is one of our strongest advocates, as I mentioned a moment ago, on behalf of the entheogenic plant medicines, also known as psychedelics, of course, and is often called upon to speak at related conferences and symposia. He also has a fairly recent memoir titled The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, My Life with Terence McKenna. And also, Dennis, you can fill people in on this next bit, but what didn't make it, I see, into this bio is any reference to the Dennis McKenna Institute. Is that the name of it?
Mckenna Academy of Natural Philosophy.
Well, I was sort of close.
Close? No, Steve, you weren't close at all. What are you talking about?
Oh, right.
But close enough, I guess.
All right, close only counts in
We're all friends here.
Close only counts in horseshoes, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so anyway, Dennis, welcome to this second of the StephenGray Vision YouTube channel videos. I'm really excited to be doing this and honored and pleased to be speaking with you, or actually mostly listening to you today, I'm sure, because you certainly have a lot to say about these things. And one thing I also didn't say when I read that bio is that I find it kind of remarkable that as you're entering into the early segment of your senior years, you're just as active as you've always been. In fact, possibly more so than some periods of your life, as far as I can tell. So maybe you could start off by telling people some of the things that you're passionate about and involved in right now.
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I've really enjoyed the Spirit Plant Medicine conferences and Conscious Living Network, and I support everything you do. I think you're also a voice for activism, I guess you could say, or at least spreading information about psychedelics and plant medicines. I'm gonna have to send you a shorter bio for next time. I think we just occupied 30 minutes of our allotted 60.
It was.
I didn't mean to make it so long. I'll send you the very, very short bio next time.
Okay.
Anyway, yes.
No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would you like me to talk about?
Well, I was going to ask you what you're up to these days, but maybe since I just mentioned it with a glancing reference to the actual title, you could tell people what is this institute, this academy?
Okay, well that fits. That fits because that is what I've been up to lately. Basically, I incorporated the Mckenna Academy about a year ago after I got to Canada. And it's many things, but its mission is primarily educational, and it's as you would expect from the term academy, but I think of it as a place for learning and exchange of dialogue and ideas in the tradition of Eleusis. Mm-hmm. I want it to be the first psychedelic university in 1500 years. Eleusis, the last of the great mystery schools in the Mediterranean, was sacked and burned by the Goths in 396 AD.
Yeah, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
I'm always I know something about Eleusis. I've read a couple of books about it and so on. But I'm always surprised when I mention it to people, even particularly within the psychedelic community, that a lot of people have never heard of it. So I wonder before you go on, if you could just give a slightly longer synopsis of what went on there.
Well, Eleusis was the last of the mystery schools, and the longest-lived version of the mystery schools. And what went on there? Many things, but it was basically a place where everyone who was anyone in Greek society at that time, and it spanned from about 1000 AD to about 500, or 1000 BC to about 500 AD. And if you were in, what you didn't necessarily have to be an aristocrat, but at some point during your lifetime, you were expected to make a pilgrimage to Eleusis. And there you underwent an experience which you weren't supposed to talk about, but people were initiated. You would enter a dark room, a dark chamber, and you would drink a beverage. And then you were expected, or what happened is people would have ineffable experiences that were transformative, which they were supposed to be forbidden to discuss what happened to them. But this was a tremendously important initiatory rite in Greek society, and you really had to undergo this in order to really be a fully vested member of at least the Greek aristocracy. There's been great speculation about what that beverage was that everyone drank. It was called the telestrion, or I think the vessel it was served in was called the telestrion. Mm-hmm. And it's been suggested
The kykeon, wasn't it? The substance was called the kykeon, maybe?
the kykeon. That's right. The telestrion was the chamber.
The chamber itself,
Yeah. You've obviously studied this more closer, or perhaps more recently than I have. But yeah, there's general consensus it was prepared from barley. So people have thought, well, maybe it's barley beer. But clearly, barley beer does not produce the kind of experiences that were attributed to the kykeon. And Carl Ruck, who is a classics scholar, and Albert Hoffman wrote a book some years ago called The Road to Eleusis.
Yes, I read that book.
You've read it, right? That's one of the major ones. And they speculated that actually it was made from barley, yes, but it was made from ergotized barley. In other words, barley infected with ergot fungus. And ergot is, of course, the parasitic fungus that grows on grains, rye primarily. It occasionally grows on barley as well. And it produces lysergic acid derivatives. Now, similar to LSD, it also produces a lot of these ergot alkaloids that are quite toxic. However, it's not clear. Hoffman suggested that they had a way to purify the preparation and remove the toxic alkaloids. A simple water extraction would have done that because the psychoactive alkaloids are lower molecular weight, so they're water soluble, whereas the peptide ergot alkaloids are not. So they would have been separated by as simple a process as making your coffee in the morning, putting it through a simple filter. It's also been speculated that there was a different strain, a different species of ergot, which grew on the rye or the barley, Claviceps paspali, as opposed to Claviceps purpurea. Claviceps paspali is known to be less toxic. All of this will probably really can't be settled, because the archaeological evidence isn't there to settle that question.
But let me lead you back into the present with a quick comment and another question, if I may.
Sure.
If I may weigh in for a moment, I just want to say that one of the reasons I'm kind of surprised, almost disappointed that more people don't know about Eleusis is because, as you referred to, everybody who was anybody, so to speak, which includes Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and all these people who...
All these people,
essentially the founders or the foundation of Western philosophical thinking went there. By some sense, the whole tradition of Western thinking has been influenced by Eleusis. And so that's one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing I wanted to say to lead back to, finding out a bit more about your academy is that... there is a, what would you call it, a meme or a vision or something like that floating around that, as you say, it was crushed, it was stamped out, it was built over top of, and as a metaphor, so to speak, there's this notion of the reopening of the temple these days. Bruce Damer spoke about it at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference a few years ago, that we're in the time of the reopening of the temple. Philip K. Dick made reference to it as well in a couple of his later books. I think it's wonderful that you're doing this, because you are, kind of connecting in and manifesting that vision. Would you not say?
Well, yeah, we want the Academy to operate in the spirit of Eleusis, and have it be a place for the exchange of ideas about natural philosophy. Natural philosophy is the precursor of science. Natural science grew out of natural philosophy, and it became preoccupied with quantitation. It became reductionist. And in some ways, I think it sacrificed some important elements in this transformation. Natural philosophy is more open to the idea that there are many ways of knowing, and there are many ways of understanding nature. They do not have to be scientific necessarily. Science is a good filter, a good lens through which to view many through which to view nature and understand nature. But by its very nature, science is constrained to, well, shall we say, excluding a lot of things, because it is basically reductionist. So natural philosophy, I felt, was more true to the spirit of the Mckenna Academy, an open-ended discussion of our place in the cosmos and our destiny and our relationship to nature and relationship to each other. And that's what my hope is that the Academy will be. I don't refer to it as the reopening of the temple necessarily, because I don't want, it's not a cult. I don't want it to be understood as a cult.
Of course not. Yeah.
You know, it isn't a cult. It's not a religion.
It's you used the term mystery school at one point?
Mystery school, yeah, a mystery school, which is what Eleusis and all these were.
Right. Yeah.
All these places were. Well, what is the mystery? Well, the mystery is here. The mystery is the mystery of existence. Essentially, everything is a mystery. Because I think one thing that science often overlooks or forgets, and it should be reminded frequently of this, science only understands a tiny, tiny fraction of what there is to know about the world. And the part that it understands is, you know, good. We can acknowledge that. That's important. But the vast, you know, if the sphere of knowledge is an expanding sphere, and what's inside the sphere is what you understand, and what's outside the sphere is everything else left to understand, then that vastly exceeds what we think we know. You know, what we think we have nailed down within this sphere of kind of consensus knowledge. One thing, though, about science, to its credit, when it works right, and it often doesn't these days, because for multiple reasons, but when science is pursued in its true spirit, it's the search for truth. And not simply the search for truth. It asks questions of nature in a very structured way, so that the answers that come back can be verified or tested to some extent. And that's the whole idea of the scientific approach. You want to understand phenomena, so you build models, you build essentially conceptual constructs of how you think something works, how you think it may be. And then you try like hell to destroy your hypothesis. You know, the whole exercise of how science is that you postulate something and then you test the hypothesis. And it's always provisional. It's either, you know, so science constructs models of the way things work, but the models are always provisional. And if you truly understand how science works, you could never say this or that is proven. We know because science has proven, you know, relativity or Newtonian physics or whatever it may be. Science never proves anything. It provides provisional models that work until there's more data. And more data is always coming in, and that may support your model, or it may completely demolish your model. And that's the excitement of science, or it may just require that you modify your model. So science is I guess, an iterative heuristic process. If it's properly practiced, that lets us expand the limits of our understanding and put our understanding on firmer ground, in the sense that we have experimentally verified some of the precepts, some of the principles that we discover through scientific exploration. So the Academy is, you know, it's natural philosophy, and it certainly acknowledges a debt to the scientific method, but we're not limited to the scientific method. We understand there are ways of knowing, ways of perceiving the world that are not scientific. That doesn't mean that they're not valid.
So I presume that implies that you will, in some fashion or another, ceremonies and direct hands-on or mouths-on work with entheogens will be part of this vision, part of this academy.
Yes, it's very much about that. In fact, the indigenous people, they often refer to sacred plant medicines, psychoactive plant medicines, as plant teachers. Mm-hmm. And in some ways I think that's a better way to characterize them than calling them psychedelics or entheogens or other terms you might use. I mean, psychedelic is it's a term that means mind manifesting, and it was out of favor for a long time. But now it's becoming back into acceptance. You can now use the term in peer-reviewed journals and places like that. So there has been a grudging acceptance that of all the terms that describe what the psychedelics do, or these unique class of psychoactive substances, however they work, whatever they do manifest the mind. So it's a default term that works by virtue of its vagueness, Yeah. I mean, whatever happens, they do manifest the mind, not always in ways that you want it to, but there is a manifestation of the mind. So I accept psychedelic as a term, but I like the term plant teachers or shamanic medicines. Mm-hmm. They also have their limitations. And then the term entheogen is another one that has been, brought forward not too long ago and is kind of competing with the term psychedelic for and it's okay, but to me it comes freighted. There's too much association with religion. And psychedelics are often used in religious or ceremonial context, but they don't have to be. I mean, they're tools for learning is what they are. They're tools for learning about nature and our own consciousness and the relationship between those.
So for the people who are watching this, who might be what you might call at the sort of psychedelics 101 level, could you say something more or less user-friendly about what does that mean, teacher? How do they teach?
Well, they teach through the insights that they can trigger when taken in the proper context. They actually... many people experience them as external intelligences, actually intelligent entities that have a great deal of knowledge that they can impart to us about everything, about the cosmos, about ourselves, about nature itself, other people, and so on. Does it really come from the plant teachers? Well, probably. I mean, it's a very hard question to answer. Mm-hmm. It's quite possible that what they do is they reveal a part of yourself that contains a wisdom that you didn't know you had, mm-hmm. that actually presents as it's part of yourself, but it presents to you as not self, right. As something separate. How do you determine whether it's one or the other? It's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. And this is an ongoing debate. Are the plant teachers really intelligent, or do they open up some channel to an inner part of yourself? I think in some ways, the real question you should be asking is the information good? Who cares what the source is? If the information, the insights, the understandings that you get from these experiences seems valid, then it doesn't really matter whether it's external or internal.
Right.
In some sense, all learning is internal. I mean, even the best teachers, human teachers, they basically give students the opportunity to educate themselves if they do it right. And I think it's very similar with the plant teachers.
Yeah, I would say that even, or that as long as you are, as I think they would say in Buddhism, running things by the first witness yourself, because I'm sure you've been around this kind of scenario. I'm sure you've heard people say, "Well, ayahuasca told me this," or like I should break up with my boyfriend or something like that.
Right.
So, there's some question as how do you know? For example, in Jeremy Narby's book, DNA and the Cosmic Serpent, if I remember it correctly, it was about 20 years ago when I read it, but if I remember it correctly, he told a story about when he did the ayahuasca, maybe his first time with the shaman down in Colombia or wherever it was, and he'd had all this contact with these reptilian-like beings who told him they were the masters of the universe, and told this to his shaman, and the shaman just rolled his eyes and said, "Oh yeah, they always say that.
They always tell you that." Right.
So how do you know, when you're getting the straight goods, so to speak,
And it's a good point. You get these messages from whatever the reptilian beings that rule the universe and so on. Well, first place, you don't know if they're really real or it's some construct of the imagination, and just because you're getting insights from a psychedelic doesn't mean it's a valid insight. You should keep your skeptical antennas well deployed. Actually, you should keep them well deployed at all times, but especially on a psychedelic.
Yeah.
And I guess that, in some ways, that goes really to the heart of what the Mckenna Academy is all about, which is encouraging people and helping people learn how to think for themselves. Most institutions, most religions, even philosophical institutions, a big part of their mission is to tell you what to think.
Oh God, yeah.
We're into teaching you how to think, and what you think is up to you.
Absolutely.
But there's a way to do it that is useful, and a way, and many people don't know it. It's a learned skill.
Yeah.
So
one thing I find with these, working myself with the psychedelics is they do open you up, regardless of whether it's a source from elsewhere or not. They do open you up to something that just feels right as truth, You get these messages and then you just run them against your life, I'll be, I'll confess, so to speak, I was doing a Santo Daime weekend fairly recently, and I don't know if I want the world to know this. It's not that big a deal, but
well, the world knows it now, Stephen.
No, not that. The thing I mean.
Oh, okay.
Which is that out of the blue, like deep in a very strong medicine ceremony, I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about anything at all, really. Just the word pride jumped up into my mind. It just came out of nowhere, and I thought, me, I'm not really a prideful person. I'm not arrogant particularly or anything like that, But then when I really kind of did a little bit of self-examination, I realized that it's pretty common, it's the way that we keep ourselves separate from each other, that we stand back and we think we're special or whatever. And that it turned out I felt like that was an issue. And that's why it came up in that scenario, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the plant medicines are wonderful teachers in that respect, in that they can give you insights about yourself and insights into nature. And of course, we are part of nature, which is something that as a species we've lost that perspective. And the Mckenna Academy is trying to reassert that, or trying to give people opportunities to re-understand their relationship to nature, because this is the problem. We've been out of whack with our relationship for nature for at least 2,000 years, and possibly much earlier than that. Recently, I've been rereading my brother's book, Food of the Gods.
Yeah, I have that book.
he wrote in 1991. It seems that there is a new edition coming out. New UK publisher is going to bring out a new edition, and they've asked me to write a foreword for it.
Nice.
So I thought, well, I haven't read it for 30 years. I better go back and have a look at it. And I'm rereading it, and I'm really impressed, actually. I have to hand it to Terence. You know, the stoned ape theory gets so much ridicule because it's always looked at from this very superficial level. And, you know, it's, oh, yeah, we ate mushrooms and then we became smart. Well, of course, that's silly. You know, but that's the shallow understanding that many people bring to what he was talking about, and it's not that at all. You know, it's much deeper than that, and it's actually quite considering it was written 30 years ago. It's incredibly timely.
How so?
Know? Well, because he is talking about exactly the issues that we're facing now.
Can you elaborate?
Which are a result of our dysfunctional relationship to nature. We've lost this understanding that we're part of nature, that nature is the boss, nature is running things, not us. Nature does not exist for us to exploit, to decimate, to rape, to destroy, which is pretty much the agenda of modern civilization. I lay a lot of this at the feet of the Abrahamic religions, who bring the message that we are the dominators. You know, we own nature; it exists to serve us. Sorry, that's not the case. We're seeing the consequences of this. You know, now in terms of what we're doing to nature, we're pushing all of the equilibrium systems that keep it sustainable, that keep it functional. This is a result of our thoughtless exploitation and use of nature. And one thing I always tell people in my talks is we have to understand that the monkeys are not running the show. You know, and this is one of the strongest messages I got from ayahuasca in my earliest and most profound trips. I was gifted a kind of a strange visionary experience. I guess you might call a biochemist's visionary experience of photosynthesis.
I know that story from you.
You know that story. It stuck with me, and it brought hope to me that, yeah, the plants are actually running this show by the very fact that they are what is sustaining life on Earth as a result of this ability to bring cosmic energy in the form of sunlight into the biosphere, use carbon dioxide and water to create, and sunlight to create complex organic compounds, such as the ones that we are made of, you know, and they are definitely maintaining the sustainability of the biosphere,
I think
or what some people call Gaia.
I think it would behoove us to be far more humble in general than we are. Perhaps since Terence has, in a sense, burst into the conversation, I might ask you a question that refers to something that he used to do, if I remember correctly. I think back in the 80s, I think maybe once a year or so, he gave an address that he called the State of the Onion, kind of a play on State of the Union, of course. And in other words, how are things unfolding? And I'm wondering if I could inspire you to comment on how you see the state of the onion at this point. How are we doing?
Not very well.
Say more.
You know, for several reasons. Again, I look back at Terence's book, written, I think, published in 1991. So that's 30 years ago. And the themes that he's talking about 30 years ago are exactly what everybody's talking about now. In other words, the effects of climate change, the effects of our dysfunctional relationship with nature, which has led us to devalue it. And this is totally encouraged by the Abrahamic religions who say your reward is in heaven. You know, the afterlife is where it all gets good. You don't have to value this world. And so people don't. And 30 years ago, if we had heard this wake-up call, we would have, and actually took it seriously, we would have been able to make some changes that might have headed things off, and actually responded to these things. But as a species, we're not very good at looking 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years ahead. As a species, we tend to be focused on what's happening next quarter. And this is to our detriment, because we could have taken some common sense steps back then that would have averted much of this if we just made some changes in energy policy and, made a serious effort to get away from fossil fuels and all that. None of that happened. So now time is growing short. Time is growing very short. The rate of climate change, the rate of destabilization of the homeostatic mechanisms that keep the planet sustainable is ever accelerating. And at a certain point, the biosphere is held together by systems of feedback loops, that keep it sustainable, keep everything stable. But if you push those loops too far in one direction, if it gets so out of balance, then you break the system. It's very resilient, but there's a limit, and it can't snap back. And we're approaching that point where we will irrevocably disable these homeostatic systems, and then we're in a heap of shit. We already are, but it's getting to the point where I don't know what we can do. First of all, we have to, again, this is the mission of the Academy. First of all, we have to wake up. We have to wake up and acknowledge what is happening. And that's a big challenge, because waking up is hard, and many, many people don't want to wake up, and because, so these are the climate change deniers and the science deniers and the people that just, it's not a comfortable message, so we have to wake up. And and this is one thing that the plant medicines can do. They are a catalyst for this shift in global consciousness. Once we wake up, we have to wise up, and we have to become wise in the choices that we make. Just like you would approach anything. Approaching psychedelics is a good example. You can approach it thoughtlessly and without any respect, and chances are, you won't get very much out of it, and you may even harm yourself. This is powerful. These are powerful medicines, powerful tools. They have to be approached respectfully and thoughtfully. And this is what, we need more of that in our society, and I see less and less of it. So I'm quite dismayed. I think that the time frame is getting shorter and shorter. We don't have the luxury of 30 years. Absolutely. The climate scientists and everyone else is basically saying probably within the next 10 to 20 years at the outside, we're going to reach a threshold. We're going to reach a point where we'll look back on the situation and we'll say, well, we could have saved it, but it's too late now. Because the system is irrevocably broken. This is why I view the COVID virus, as unpleasant as it is, as actually a great gift from Gaia in a certain way, because it's a reminder, number one, nature is the boss. And you monkeys have forgotten this. Well, some of you listen to ayahuasca, but not enough, right? So here's another wake-up call from the virus. And the virus is basically saying, remember who the real boss is. You're not outside of nature. And it's clearly demonstrated that very powerful in the impact that it's had on us. And the other effect that it's had, by necessity, it's caused us to pull our elbows in a little bit, to slow down, to stop this mindless consumerism and running around the planet and doing all these things that they're fun, but they're not necessarily sustainable. And I mean, and I'm as guilty as the next guy. You know, I do a lot of travel. I go to conferences. I go to South America and do retreats and so on. I've always justified it because I feel like, well, I'm doing this in the service of the plants, of the earth. I'm doing it for the sake of the larger mission. So it's okay, you know, but I have my carbon footprint too.
Yeah.
I think that just slowing things down and contracting, even though it has tremendous economic impact on many people, and that's not good. But on the other hand, the other side of the coin is that, you know, we've been saying for a long time that global fossil fuel driven, petroleum driven global society is not sustainable.
Absolutely.
You know, we're poisoning ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
We're literally poisoning the planet and poisoning ourselves. We have got to wake up.
I agree regarding the virus that way completely, and you put it really well. However, there are quite a few of us, and I think I would include myself in that number. Maybe it's just a concern and a projection to some extent, but we're not quite sure this one's going to do it. This one's kind of like the trailer for the movie or the short version, you know, before the big one comes. And we think, a lot of us seem to think that there's a pretty good chance that sometime within the next 5 to 10 years there will be another event similar to this that's going to be even more serious, and we'll just, you know,
yes.
Like, there's a metaphor that, you know, when the universe wants to get your attention, or anything wants to get your attention, so to speak, it starts with a gentle pat on the shoulder, and if you don't pay attention, then it's like a bit of a push in the chest or something, and if you don't pay attention to that message, then it's a kick in the fucking ass. Pardon.
Yeah. That's right, and I totally agree. That could have come right out of my mouth. I think the COVID virus is a gentle push, a gentle slap on the wrist, a gentle knock on the and basically saying, you know, you think this is bad, you know, wait till the next one comes, wait till the next one after that comes. I mean, this one, nature, Gaia, whatever you want to call it, is being so kind to us by sending us this COVID virus, because, you know, most people are not seriously affected by it. Some are very seriously affected by it, but it's a small fraction. But you know, compared to what it could be, I mean, wait till the, you know, airborne transmitted version of Ebola comes along. You know, then we're in deep trouble. You know, what makes this this COVID virus pandemic tolerable is that it hasn't brought down our infrastructure very much. You know, we still have the internet, everything functions. We have the internet, and so that makes isolating and all of that more tolerable. We also have access to news through the internet. We have an idea what's happening. I mean, there's lots of misinformation, but, you know, we have to learn the skill to extract the good information and dismiss the rest of it. But what do you do when a pandemic like this comes on and the internet is not working? You know, and there is no way to know what's really going on. And when, you know, I mean, it could be very, I mean, it actually could be the end of the world as we know it. And I think the COVID pandemic has actually created the end of the world as we know it. You know, the world that is going to emerge after COVID, and I'm not sure there is going to be an after. I think it may be a virus that we have to learn to live with, you know, for a long time, perhaps not as widespread. I mean, it may fade off, but it's probably going to come back. But, you know, we can deal with it because it hasn't destroyed the fabric of society. It's created great economic hardship for many people, but it's also, because we're a resilient species, we can envision a new economic model. We can envision life after COVID and how things might be different, and in general better. If we can make that transition, I think life could actually be better. It's hard to imagine how you could get past a much more virulent virus, a much more virulent pandemic, where with COVID the mortality rate is maybe 1 to 3%.
Yeah.
What do you do when the mortality rate is 50%?
I think if there's another surge of this next winter, it's going to be like kicking a poor schmuck when he's down. I mean, the Canadian government is, in my view anyway, is they've handled this extremely well in a lot of ways, and they've been very generous by opening up the coffers. But man, they're heading for a $250 billion deficit this year, or I mix up sometimes between debt and deficit. But we're putting the Canadian economy deeply in debt, and it's going to be hard to crawl back from this. But it's been things like they've given a $2,000 supplement to anyone who's lost their job for 4 months in a row. That's $8,000 per person. They are supporting businesses to keep their employees on. They're doing all these different things that are costing a lot of money. And if this comes back again next year, they're not going to have much left to deal with.
They're not going to have much money left.
Yeah.
No, it's exactly right. I mean, if you look at all the countries in the world, I have to say, boy, we're lucky to live in Canada. I mean, for one thing, it's becoming clear that, it's a compassionate society. It's a society that works, and they've reacted, at least in BC, they've reacted appropriately to this virus, and they've held it down, and the benefits of doing that, and the right message coming from the health authorities is really paying off, even though there's always segments of society that, want to push back, and it's like, nobody's going to tell me what to do, and liberty or death, and all this horse shit. This is the American approach to it, and we see what's happening, and it's really sad to see. And because American society, U.S. society is already so divided, and there's so much polarization on almost every issue. It's the worst time, really, for something like this to happen to the States, because there's no sense of commonality. There's no sense of shared destiny. It's, you're red or blue or something else.
Terrible.
And reason and compassion has gone out the window, basically.
For a lot of people,
Yeah, and it's going to be, it isn't going to turn out well, I think, in the States. And the thing is, this is a global pandemic. If the States goes completely off track, which is how it looks like it's going to, then it will reinfect the whole world. We're looking at the consequences of even more extreme, Bolsonaro's policy in Brazil is kind of like Trump on steroids. I mean, it's even worse.
He's getting a lot of blowback, fortunately.
Yeah, it's getting blowback.
They might get rid of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dennis, I think we're coming kind of close to an hour. I don't want to make this too long for people. And, I'm sure you have lots more to say that I would love to hear, and lots of other people would love to hear. So maybe we ought to do this again in a couple of months. But in the meantime,
sure.
I think we're both very aware, as are many other people, that there's some very dark possibilities of where things could go in the next decades, But, I'd like to leave people on the most hopeful tone as possible, because I think without hope, then despair takes over, and there's no functionality in that, in my view. Regardless of the situation, as
right.
Bishop Desmond Tutu has famously said, that people need to believe in the possibility of possibility. So could I ask you to, kind of give end this with a sort of a hopeful message? Like, what do you see as our best way forward, so to speak?
Well, Stephen, I mean, I like to give a hopeful message, but it's getting harder and harder. There is a tendency to give in to despair. the future looks pretty dark,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I mean, if the hope is that there will be some kind of global epiphany or global awakening, and I think the plant medicines are catalysts for this, but they don't get out to enough people and they don't get out fast enough. So it's not clear. I mean, what can I do about it? I just feel like I keep doing what I'm doing. I keep talking and so on,
Mm-hmm.
even knowing, just like you do, even knowing that that's probably ineffective in the end. It's not. It's hard to say. I think, as a species, we've always, we're very bad at taking responsibility for ourselves. We have this mindset that looks to some savior to come. I mean, Jesus is going to come back and save us all, or the alien space brothers, the enlightened space brothers are going to show up in mild-wide ships and help us get straightened out. I got news for you, folks. Jesus ain't coming. Neither are the alien space brothers. We got to get our asses out of this, and it's up to us.
Yeah.
And I guess that's not a very affirmative message, but that is the truth, damn it.
Well, it could be affirmative, Dennis, because regardless of what happens, and obviously, as we've acknowledged here, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. I feel that there is only one functional attitude, and that is to keep doing what people like you are doing. That I keep trying to manifest visions for good work and so on. And what else are you going to do? I mean, there is no benefit in giving
what else
to despair. And you mentioned a little while ago in this conversation that this is a resilient species. There's a wonderful book by Paul Gilding called The Great Disruption, in which he says repeatedly in this book, we're slow, but we're not completely stupid. And there will come a point, it will probably involve an immense amount of suffering, but there will come a point when the whole planet will kind of get that we have to change, and even without the real inner awakening, the whole impetus of government is going to have to shift toward protecting the climate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these things are just going to become more and more urgent day by day. Of course,
right.
As long as I'm rambling now for a moment, I will say that you and I'm sure you are, and I'm certainly aware that there's I don't know what the word is, an archetype or some kind of, free-floating idea that's been around for a long time that we may be in for a period of such a severe retreat that little communities. I think Eckhart Tolle spoke about this in his second book, where he talked about sort of like-minded communities kind of retreating into a place where they hold space and hold the wisdom until such time when things can open up again. So that's one of the ways that things might go. But otherwise, I think everyone who can do anything just needs to take the attitude that the ship is kind of sinking and all hands on deck.
Yeah, the ship, I mean, to carry the analogy further, not only is the ship sinking, it's on fire, and the inmates from the asylum are running the show. So everything on all levels is pretty discouraging right now. Yeah. And I do think, I do think that certainly in the States, the lack of any real leadership is certainly making that situation worse, much worse, and that and people's natural tendency to retreat into delusion, that everything's fine, there's nothing going on, it's all a hoax. Yeah. I'm sorry, it's not a hoax, and neither is the COVID virus. I mean, there are now conspiracy theories around the COVID virus, and that's all a hoax, or it was made in a lab in China and all that. Who cares? I mean, that doesn't really matter. There's still a problem that we're facing that we have to deal with, and So in that sense, I think you're exactly right. I think, in fact, I think I use this very term. This is the trailer, not the movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is the preview of what it might look like. When the movie comes, it's going to be much, much worse.
Well,
And
yeah.
and do we have time to prepare and change? Well, we certainly need to. One step in that direction. We have to change our understanding of government and what society is, and the function of government should be to help people live better lives, and protect people. I mean, I guess I'm a flaming socialist. Okay,
Mhm.
I accept that label. I think that's fine. I think the function of government is to help people live better, more fulfilling, healthier, happier lives, and that's and to a certain extent, I think Canada aspires to that. I mean, they see that as values, as community values. They don't succeed. They fall short, as of course inevitably they must, but they're trying. And in the States, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
These ideas are heretical. These ideas are, it's very much everyone for themselves. And, if I win, you must lose.
Yeah.
That's the mindset of the state. And that's what's tearing our culture apart down there.
Well,
I mean, I left my country because I couldn't take it anymore.
no kidding. Well, I don't know here, Dennis, and I think that might be a good place to wrap up this interview, actually, because we've been going on for a good hour or so.
Yeah,
With you, it could easily go for 2 hours. So
probably.
part two, before too long. And so I run these things, Final Cut Pro, where you can add in little tabs and things like that under the screen. Tell people how they can, if you want them to want them to look sites up, or how to find out about the Mckenna Academy. Maybe you could mention a couple of those things.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll just give you the website. It's pretty simple. MY. Yep. Okay. So people can look at the website, and one thing they might want to look at is the events page. One thing we're learning now with, a lot of what the Academy does is physical retreats and conferences. We can't do any of that now, so we've had to develop an online presence. And it's been an interesting and rewarding process. You're probably aware of this 5-part tribute to Terence McKenna we did in April.
Yeah.
Had tremendous turnout for that.
Wonderful.
So, and it was an open access, there was no cost. I didn't want to I didn't want to monetize it, because it's in memory of my brother, who, believe it or not, died 20 years ago in April. Mm-hmm. It's hard to believe that he's been gone that long, because he's still very much part of the conversation as a result of his YouTube presence and so on. Yeah. But anyway, look at the Academy and look at our events page. We've got some very interesting events in the planning stages to follow up on that series that we did. So
if and
yes, I'd like people to look at it.
Yeah, if and when people are able to hop on airplanes, you haven't actually said where this physical location of the Academy is. Where is it?
Right now there is no physical location. I mean, we're virtual. We want to be able to stage events and retreats and conferences in the Sacred Valley of Peru.
Oh, wonderful.
That's where my heart is. It's a lovely place. It's a wonderful place. Although, I'm sure it still is. But, I am in close touch with my friends in Peru, both Iquitos and the Sacred Valley. The Sacred Valley is much less impacted by COVID, probably because of the altitude or the UV flux. They still have it there, but Iquitos is just a mess. I mean, it is really, really bad.
I heard about that. Yeah. So, Dennis,
Yeah.
at this point, I'm going to say thank you very much for taking this time with me, and presumably with, I hope, many, many people who tune into this. It's been very informative, very instructive, and despite your doubts about our short, near-term, and mid-term future, you are, you're keeping your warrior pants on. You're out there, you're doing it, and
Doing my best.
you're, you know,
I mean, yeah, I mean, even though the message is maybe not that uplifting or that optimistic, but somehow in my heart, I feel that we're going to get through this. Some of us are going to get through this, no matter how bad it gets. Not necessarily you and me, but people. We are a resilient species. The planet is resilient, but right now it's definitely in bad shape. But it's been in bad shape before, and the planet. I do believe in the Gaia concept. I think that the community of in sentient species on the planet really does work as a superorganism, and it will do what it needs to do to protect itself.
Beautiful.
And sometimes you have to shake the fleas off, and maybe that's what's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty positive message to end on, so let's end it there, okay?
all right, good enough.
Thanks again.
All right.
I'm gonna take the recording off, but we can stick around for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Just to
Thanks, Stephen. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Dennis. Wonderful.